We were walking along the banks of the Maitland River and came across this bug. Looks really weird. This is a male Dobson fly. It only lives for 3 days or so. The female, who doesn't have those big pincers, is more likely to give you a bite. She only lives for about 10 days in the adult form. The larva of the Dobson fly is a Helgrammite, and these live in fast-flowing water, shed their skins about 8 to 10 times during their 3 to 4 year life cycle. As you can see, they have huge pincers at the front which are used to devour stream invertebrates. If we're going to design a fly, we should really have a look at the anatomy of this bug, and so let's go to it. The Helgrammite has a tail with 2 claspers, an abdomen with 8 or 9 gilled segments, a thorax with 3 pairs of legs, and a head with pincers. Let's start to tie. First of all, we need some wool, and it's best if this is not a synthetic wool. The synthetic wools won't sink as well. So we start the fly by using a tube tying needle, which is about 3 to 4 inches long. We could use a large darning needle as well. We cover this with a small amount of silicone rubber sealant, and this takes about half an hour to dry. Start at the pointed end of the needle. Start the thread there. Once the thread's been secured, start tying in the wool segment. The wool segment should be about 18 inches in length because we have to make several passes over the needle. Tie in the wool at the starting point, and I forgot at this stage to put in a hitch at the tying point, and that would have helped later on. You can see here it's all starting to unravel. However, we saved this later on by just going over the top and putting in a more secure tie. We go down the needle and then come back in the opposite direction with the wool back to the tying point. Here you can see I rescued this bit by tying it in properly this time, and then we take another application of the silicone cement, spread it around a little bit. It's a bit messy, you have to watch your fingers don't get too clogged up with the stuff, and then go back for a third time with the wool to the other end of the needle. Once we get down to the other side, we work the thread to the rear in loose turns. These don't have to be tight, until we get to what's going to be the tail of the fly, and here we secure in the wool. and then we trim it off. The next element for this fly is a grizzly hen neck feather. If you can get one 4.5 inches long or even longer, that's great. Don't need to worry about taking the fluff off the lower end because as you'll see later, this adds to the effect of looking like gill filaments. Once we've secured the feather, we again take loose turns along the body, going back to what's going to be the front part of the abdomen. Then we rotate the feather 7 or 8 times. When we're applying the feather, we widen the gap as we go further along the fly. We don't keep it uniform. So there should be about 7 or 8 turns, and then that's secured firmly in place. The rest of the feathers removed, more securely tied in, and then a couple of hitches to secure that in place. The next step, we take some thin skin, about 5 inches long and 1/4 inch thick. Remove it from the backing. Or another thing we could use is one of those plastic bags that electrical equipment comes in. Retie at the rear of the fly, securing it once again, getting rid of the extra thread, then apply the thin skin so the shiny side will be facing upwards. We secure the thin skin by 8 or 9 turns of thread. Instead of thread, we could use some thin wire. This will probably increase the longevity of the fly, but it would also compromise the ability of the fly to flex. Clip off the thin skin, leaving a large amount at the front because this has to cover the body of the fly. Allow it to dry for a little while. And once it's dry, we can take the whole abdomen off the needle. This stage we could leave it as it is, or another thing we could do is we could put some pressure on it and flatten it out so it appears to be more like the actual larva. Next we take a hook with some wire and use about 10 turns of wire so that this part of the fly, which is going to be the thorax and head, will sink. Helicopter off the wire and secure it with several turns of thread. Could also use some cement at this stage to hold the wire in place. I didn't bother with that at this stage, but that could be done. Next we take the abdomen that we've already tied, which is dried, and we trim it off so that we have about 1/4 inch tying point. Tie this in firmly, very firmly, just in front of the bend of the hook. Then take a pair of goose biots and start forming some legs. Here we're applying the rear legs, all on each side. Then start applying some black ice dub. The ice dub has a nice reflective component. Bend over the first part of the thorax. This first part should be quite small. The next part of the thorax should be a little bit longer. We apply another few segments of ice dub, and then the second pair of legs immediately in front of the tying point that we just established with the thin skin. Put in another pair of legs to represent the second pair of legs on the thorax. And tie these in securely. Apply some more dubbing again to cover up the remnants of the wire. Bring the thin skin forward again and tie it in a fashion so that's the end of the top part of the thorax. Anything above that's going to be the head component. Here you can see we're putting in another pair of biots to represent the front legs. Finally, next we bring over the final segment of the thin skin. Here I've left it a bit short, so I have to put a little V notch on it. If I haven't left it so short, it's easier to tie in. So I'll put a little V in there and tie it in front of the front legs. Once the thin skin is securely tied in, we need to apply two smaller goose biots to represent the pincers at the head of the fly. So we put a pair of these right at the head of the fly and finish off with another small amount of black ice dip. Could mention that this fly could be in a brown colour or a green. Here it's just in black. Whip finish at the top. Trim off the thread and take the fly out of the vise and trim back the feathers on the abdomen. Keep them in like a wedge shape, being wider at the front end and going down, becoming narrower at the bottom. At the same time, can take off any pieces of any segments of the feather that are lying on the underside of the fly, so that basically you just have gill segments protruding from the side of the fly. Once that's done, trim off the back end, making sure that you don't cut through any thread. It might be worthwhile at this stage to put a little dab of cement on the tails just so that nothing comes awry. And there it is, final fly. Dynammite. Give it a try. It works well with bass, and it'll also work well with rainbows. Thanks for watching. Bye.